All right, folks, here we are with a Right to Life reaction video. Jonathan Keller and I, good to see you here, Mr. Jonathan.
It's great to be here. It's been so long, almost a whole 24 hours.
I know, seriously. So what we are going to do here, we're going to listen to the sections of the CBS News vice presidential debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. And we're going to listen to the sections that relate to abortion. And we're going to give our live, unbiased, unfiltered reactions. Jonathan and I wound up at an event together watching the debate, but we only watched the latter half or so of the debate. So I think Jonathan and I completely missed the whole section dealing with the abortion issue. So as a result, you are now getting us in our pure, uncut, unfiltered live reaction. So here we go. This is J.D. Vance versus Tim Walz in the CBS News vice presidential debate. Here we go.
Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor
Already framing it. We're already just framing it as it's reproductive rights, not in a neutral way as abortion, but assuming that abortion is a reproductive right and therefore you don't like them and whatever. Everyone has the right to reproduce. The disputed thing is about something that's specifically not reproducing. I didn't think I would jump in literally now to the subject of reproductive rights. Yes, didn't think I'd jump in literally 7 words in.
No, John, actually, that is a good point, though, because I'm sorry. The fact that it is, like you said, everyone has a right to reproduce. Yes. In fact, we would love
nobody
more people
disputes
generally to reproduce more. Our birth rate is falling calamitously low.
It could be a real problem.
Yep. So,
all right, here we go.
Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what...
It's precisely what the bill allows.
Yeah. But, okay, so as much as we just, slagged on Norah O'Donnell and CBS, all right.
Good question.
Kudos to them for actually not starting off by attacking J.D. Vance.
Although, in fairness, let's not give him too much credit here.
Yeah.
They're framing it as Donald Trump said that you did such and such. Is that true?
Yeah.
But is that really what happened, Tim?
But I mean, they make it sound like a scary bill, and they make it sound like it's pretty bad.
Because it was, and it is.
And he seems, this is a meta comment on the entirety of the debate, but Tim Walz, I don't think did himself any favors the entirety of the debate in terms of there's a handful of answers that were okay, but the entire time, and John, we mentioned this last night when we were watching it, he looked nervous.
Oh, yeah.
He looked not, I've listened to some commentary.
Nervous,
He looked scared. Like he legitimately looked like a guy who was caught knowing that he shouldn't be there.
Yeah, well, and now let's address what he's talking about. That is what the bill does. He signed a bill guaranteeing a right to abortion that was not bounded in any way by gestational age limits.
Yep.
If you're going to approve that and not have an age limit restriction, that means you support abortion in the 3rd trimester. So he's just lying about what his bill does. And we'll talk about it more. Let's listen to the rest of his answer.
On everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was.
You introduced this
bill. He put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade. 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, we send it.
Again, I mean, obviously we're going to disagree with how he frames this, but again, it's not talking just about personal autonomy. The issue in debate is whether there is another human being whose autonomy is also at issue. But of course, rather than actually debate that question honestly, we have to just pretend it's a non-issue. So
the states, it's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly died.
I'm almost certain that this is not correct. I'm almost certain the way he's framing this is wrong.
Yep.
I mean, there are instances like this where, first of all, Texas's law does not ban abortion for cases where there's risk to the mother's life. Okay. Secondly, a premature delivery of a child in that situation is something that's separate from direct intended abortion. So all of the state abortion laws have exceptions for the life of the mother. So I'm not buying his framing of this. I don't know the specifics of this case, but I'm really not buying his framing of this because and only because they've been so deceptive and so dishonest about every other instance like this.
Correct.
Particularly the Georgia law, where they talked about the women who died from not getting a D&C procedure after taking the abortion pill. Georgia law completely allowed that. So anyway, let's continue.
And now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when got asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota...
I mean, maybe there is.
There is no right in this?
I mean, 2 wrongs don't make... I mean, I'm not sure what he's even... I mean, he's trying to say
abortion isn't right.
He's trying, I mean, I guess he's trying to say you're unrealistic if you don't think that something horrible has to happen here, which can't say that's a ringing endorsement of abortion.
What we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda, or
again, the framing of this, of we put women in charge of their health care, as if the government would never dare in any other circumstance to regulate the choices a patient might have as far as the kind of health care they're getting or receiving. We don't trust patients' healthcare choices when, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when people got really upset about people deciding to try to take ivermectin. I mean, like we don't allow and
yes.
I mean that's a more politically charged example, I guess.
No, but it's true.
But you don't just trust patients to just decide whatever they want for their health care, absent any kind of ethical concerns whatsoever. That's not how life works. That's not how medicine works. You don't let patients make their healthcare decisions completely disconnected from government oversight or regulation. The whole healthcare industry in America is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the world. And all of a sudden, liberals act as though, oh, we should never get between a woman and her doctor. They do that all the time. Everyone does that all the time. That's how you have a regulated industry. This idea that, abortion is this one way that the government's intruding, that's not okay. But any other way the government wants to intrude in healthcare is fine. It's totally hypocritical and ridiculous.
Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies.
Okay.
Pause. Okay.
All right.
This is a good one.
Tim Walz's own state of Minnesota does the exact same thing that Project 2025 does. Tim Walz's home state of Minnesota collects data on women who have had miscarriages, not just women who have had abortions, women who've had miscarriages. It is anonymized data for the purposes of tracking healthcare outcomes and things like that. Project 2025, which is not even a Trump administration initiative.
Correct.
It's a thing put together by a conservative think tank, proposed the idea of requiring states to provide anonymized data about abortions performed within their state, data that Minnesota is already providing right now. The point of Project 2025 proposing this is to insist that states like California that don't provide that data to the CDC do report it. So Walz is so dishonest here, his eyes are turning brown.
Going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatment.
By making it more difficult to get contraception, we mean that Trump and Vance purportedly don't want to force employers to cover contraception in their employer-based health insurance plans when it conflicts with their religious duties. This is a big thing that the pro-abortion side does. They shift gears from abortion being basically Republicans are opposing access to something by which what they really mean is Republicans are opposing the government funding or furnishing something, or the government forcing private entities to furnish that for other people. So he's eliding that. Republicans are making it harder to get access to contraception. By which you mean, yeah, we don't want to force people to provide it who don't want to provide it. We don't want to force people to provide it when it violates their conscientious beliefs.
So
their
hold on, John.
conscientious beliefs.
I have to point out one thing also. This is something that was really amazing to me on the whole thing with Project 2025 requiring a registry of pregnancies.
Okay, just going back to that. Yeah.
Yes, quickly, because I was trying to find the quote. I didn't want to misstate it. But our friend Roger Severino,
who wrote that section of Project 2025?
he did.
Yeah.
He tweeted about this. He said Cheryl Gay Stoltenberg was helping run the fact check for the New York Times last night.
Okay.
And I just texted it in our little group chat along with producer Colton. And the quote was, Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. The New York freaking Times. False. Project 2025, a blueprint for governing drafted by the Conservative Heritage Foundation, does not specifically call for a registry of pregnancies, but does call for existing federal agencies to collect more accurate data about abortion.
So even the New York Times is saying that Tim Walz is full of it here.
Even the New York Times. And Roger Severino, when he retweeted that, he said, thanks for accurately fact-checking this. We only recommend, Project 2025 only recommends the 3 non-reporting states, California, Maryland, and I believe it's D.C., report anonymous abortion statistics, just like Walz's Minnesota and 46 other states currently do voluntarily.
There you go. Let's continue.
For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all...
What is being proposed about infertility treatments? There's literally nothing being proposed other than more and more and more support for infertility treatments. To excessive and ludicrous degrees that are driving Jonathan and me nuts, in ways that are not respectful towards the dignity of human children created as embryos. All right.
On this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many.
That's completely not true. The maternal mortality skyrocketing in Texas, that's not true. I will say I agree with him about what's right for Texas may not be right for Washington. This is the part where I agree. I'm so far on the opposite end of the spectrum from Walz here that I'm actually becoming in agreement.
It's the horseshoe effect.
Yeah. So he is right to point out, if you think of this as an issue of fundamental rights or fundamental dignity, pro-abortion people are thinking of it as a fundamental right because they frame it as right to female bodily autonomy. We are framing it as far as a fundamental right to life for children growing in the womb. He's correct that it doesn't make a lot of sense within the American tradition to have one state upholding this fundamental right and another state not. And that was the tension that would only get resolved during the Civil War over slavery. That it didn't make sense that some states were free states, some states were slave states, some states treated people as property and some didn't.
Such a nation could not long endure.
Such a nation could not long endure. Yeah, that was Mark Twain. No, it's Abraham Lincoln. Another guy who's frequently misquoted. Anyway, so I actually disagree with Walz so far that I actually start to agree with him on that point.
Other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are...
This is another highly disputed thing that Walz just breezes past as if it's not the point in contention.
This is about... John, a lot of times I think people, especially online, very frequently misuse the logical fallacy phrase, begging the question.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes. And usually what they mean is that raises the question or that asks a question.
Begging a question is a logical fallacy.
In this case, this is actually begging the question because he says, this is healthcare. And it's like, no, you are begging the question and literally asserting the point that is in contention.
Yeah. One of the things that is in dispute is whether abortion is health care or not.
Right.
Is it health care or is it something else?
Is it the murder of a...
Is it homicide, actually?
Yeah.
Healthcare is defined as interventions to restore or maintain health for somebody, to fix something that's wrong or maintain you in a state of rightness. What ill is abortion treating? Pregnancy. That's the only thing it's addressing. And pregnancy is not an illness. Pregnancy is a natural bodily process that abortion is artificially arresting. It is artificially ending the life of another human organism. So thus, it is fair, I think, to dispute whether it is actually health care at all. It's done by people in lab coats. It's done by people with MD at the end of their name, or in California, NP or PA.
Yep.
But that doesn't make it healthcare necessarily. Okay, a nose job, a Michael Jackson nose job, that's not healthcare. You need a doctor to do it, but it's not healthcare. It's not fixing anything that's wrong.
If a doctor or a nurse practitioner in a lab coat comes in and smothers their patient with a pillow,
yeah, that's not healthcare.
just because it occurs inside
a
the
hospital,
and
yeah.
by someone who is wearing a white lab coat and a stethoscope.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not healthcare.
Ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
Senator Vance, when did you start beating your wife? Why are we just taking this obviously highly disputed, argumentative framing of the question as Governor Walz presents it? So Senator Vance, are you going to do that?
Hold on, John. I gotta read you yet another. This is kind of surprising to me because Tim Walz is so far out to lunch on this. Not only did the New York Times fact check him on this claim, but before JD Vance says something, I just posted in our group chat a video fact check from CNN of all places.
Hey,
that says this is their senior reporter Daniel Dale. He says, quote, Project 2025's 900-page policy document is online. You can read it. Nothing in it proposes to make anyone register their pregnancy with the government. What Project 2025 does is propose that the federal government take steps to make sure it's getting from every state detailed after-the-fact anonymous data about abortion and miscarriage.
Yeah.
The federal government already gets this from almost every state on a voluntary basis. Project 2025 wants to make it mandatory, which would be great for California since
which is the one
refuse
big
to report
state.
it.
Yeah, we're the one big state that does it.
But there's no pregnancy registration involved in this data collection. Project 2025 doesn't change that. And in fact, Tim Walz's own state of Minnesota already posts detailed after-the-fact anonymous and miscarriage data online on the state health department website.
Right.
It's just,
So why would CBS frame it like that when they know it's wrong?
Yep.
It's almost like there's a left-wing bias in the media. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of this phenomenon? All right.
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, I grew up in a working-class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do.
It's an interesting framing of it, don't you think? Like framing it as we need to earn the American people's trust. So he's fully acknowledging that the Republican position is unpopular here and trying to address it head on. I'd like to see kind of where he goes with this. All right.
I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it.
Let me pause and say one thing here.
Yeah.
Important note.
Yeah.
And I saw this again, John. I will anonymize this, but I will say that you and I are part of several group chats and different things that we chat about from time to time.
Yeah.
I was encouraged to see
the vaguest way.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was encouraged to see a Catholic activist who pointed out. I will anonymously quote what this activist said.
Okay.
What's notable to me is that Vance managed to avoid clearly contradicting church teaching. He used the phrase fertility treatments instead of IVF.
Okay.
And NAPRO, to be fair,
NAPRO's part of that.
it is a fertility treatment.
The thing is, though, he's on a ticket with a guy who said, I want to have the federal
Yes.
government fund IVF, and
Which
I want to have health insurance plans cover it.
Which I don't love. I wish that there was not this illusion of saying, oh, yeah, Tim Walls mentioned fertility treatments, and we're talking about fertility treatments, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
I wish that he could have made more clear we need to do more to treat underlying causes of infertility.
I mean, I would have liked that, but I don't think that's what the ticket he's on, the party he's representing, I don't think that's what they support. So, I mean, I would like that too. I would like rainwater to be beer. I would like, I would like flowers and rainbows to come out of my nose. But,
I don't know. If rainwater was beer, you'd have a lot of drunk pets. But
there you go. All right.
Easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think
That
there's
would be
so
good.
much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been...
Just to jump in with the California situation,
Yes.
it's definitely true in California with Medi-Cal, with how our health insurance systems are set up. California does far more to furnish and facilitate abortion than childbirth. So I do think a lot of people choose abortion because of these sinful structures of how public health insurance is set up, how abortion gets funded and prioritized, how childbirth does not. So there's something to what Vance is saying there that I think is really true, and I think is definitely true also specifically true in the California context.
very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions.
Yeah. John Paul II would disagree with him.
Okay, so this is an area where I
mean, I understand that maybe in this political moment, pushing for nationwide restrictions is not going to happen.
Right.
But I also, I mean, I guess there's fundamentally something wrong with a majority popular vote being the thing that decides whether someone lives or dies.
Right.
And that's
Okay,
a fundamental problem that John Paul II pointed out in his work, Evangelium Vitae. And yeah.
Is it, real quick, is it possible to go back like 10 seconds on the video? Because
Okay.
I actually have heard this one section of it.
Okay.
And I thought, well, I want to hear J.D. Vance's entire response here, because I think he slightly, I think he is on to something here.
All right,
I'm curious
here we
what
go.
you say here.
California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you.
All of Donald Trump's accusations about Minnesota were dead accurate.
Yep.
All right.
About this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state.
This is a lie.
Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care.
To get an abortion, to get the abortion pill.
Amber Thurman died. in that journey back and forth.
Pause. She did not die in the journey.
She didn't die in the journey.
She died at home.
Because even though in Georgia it was totally legal to provide her with aftercare, it's because the abortion pill is dangerous. 5% of the time, it's an incomplete abortion, meaning not everything is expelled from the woman's body. There's a high risk of infection. And for some reason or another, it didn't have anything to do with Georgia's law, because Georgia's law says you can provide a woman aftercare. If you can provide a woman with a DNC procedure to remove the body of a child who is already dead, that's clearly spelled out in Georgia law. She didn't get it for some reason or another, whether it was malpractice on the part of the hospital. Amber Thurman died because abortion pills are dangerous.
Yep.
It's not because Georgia's abortion law limited her ability to receive that care. This is a flat out 100% lie that Walls is spitting out right now.
The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body?
Replace control your own body with, well, I guess you don't have to, with your right to live.
Is determined on geography. There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk,
yeah, we're just not going to talk about all the women who do die in blue states from the abortion pill. Also,
you know what, John? Yeah. I'm going to make an analogy here.
All right.
Look,
hold on to your hats, folks.
There were, I have heard through history that there were a lot of African Americans,
yes,
slaves in the 1800s, who died on the Underground Railroad.
Yes.
And they were, look, John, they were trying to flee to a state that was free. And if those free states,
if the slaves had just stayed in Georgia, if the slave had just stayed in Georgia, then they wouldn't have died,
John,
because they wouldn't have gone on the Underground Railroad.
Here's the other thing. If those northern states were not offering freedom, if those northern states
then
were not trying to entice people to try to leave, if every state in the nation was a slave state, well, then you wouldn't have these tragic cases of people dying while they were trying to escape and find freedom.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the level of logic that Tim Walz is saying here. We should make the entire country equally horrific on human rights.
Just so that, Anyway.
About this subject, and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did, when I was running for Senate in 2022, talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2020.
All right. Well, let's... What is the difference between a national abortion ban and a national abortion standard? I feel like Vance is kind of trying to shimmy his way out of this.
Yeah. And this is where
the very flat thing is, and the problem is that Vance has and a lot of Republicans had, is that they voted for national legislation to restrict abortion at 20 weeks, at 15 weeks, et cetera, a million times when Roe v. Wade was still on the books, and when they knew that it wouldn't become law. Now that it could become law and the political dynamic has changed, all of a sudden they're like, oh, we shouldn't support nationwide abortion bans. Seems kind of corny to me.
Yeah.
2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making child.
So this is an interesting approach. He's like saying flat out that the Republican, he's basically saying flat out the Republican pro-life position is unpopular and that more or less we need to pause on it, pursue more sort of neutrally acceptable pro-family policies until we earn people's trust back.
So I think he is half right here. And this is the thing that I heard a lot of pushback on, where people were saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe that he's capitulating and, compromising on life. And I'm like, okay, I think this is the hard part.
I'm one of these people, by the way.
Well, this is the hard part in the context of a debate. I think that in this answer, J.D. Vance is tragically correctly assessing the current state of opinion of the American body politic.
Probably. Yeah.
You look at how tragically in the last 2 years since Roe v. Wade was overturned, you look at how every single one of these referendums has gone
the wrong way.
And you look at how, in some cases, not every case, but in some cases, candidates who do not speak well on the abortion issue have bungled and bumbled, and they have lost their elections.
Right.
And I think I think there is a kernel of truth that right now the American people are tragically more in line with Kamala Harris's position on abortion than Donald Trump's position.
Sort of. I mean, sort of. I mean, the problem is that Harris et al. Are messaging it better because they say in generic terms there should be a right to abortion. And then people say, oh, yeah. When you drill down into what people specifically believe about abortion, most people don't support abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Most people don't support abortion in the third trimester. Most people don't support all these things that Democrats support, and all of which is encompassed in their very generalized language that's in their legislation to say, we support a right to abortion, by which they mean we support abortion completely unbounded for all 40 weeks of pregnancy for any reason. I think they've messaged it so well that people think they're voting for something moderate when in fact they're voting for something very extreme. And I think that's happened in state after state after state. That's the kind of legislation that Tim Walz and the Democrats passed in Minnesota. So
this is the
DFL,
thing,
excuse me.
Well, this is the thing where I think, and you'll hear it in the second part of this answer, I think J.D. Vance correctly diagnoses the problem, but I think what he could have and should have done, which would have been great, would have been part of the reason why the American people don't trust us is because the media is lying to you about what the Democrats actually support.
Tim Walz just rattled off 3 straight lies about 3 different circumstances that didn't have anything to do with state pro-life laws limiting someone's ability to access care.
Right.
Do something like that. Push back on, hey, you realize when they say they want legal abortion, they mean legal abortion for all 40 weeks. Do you want legal abortion after 15 weeks?
Care more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that, and that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom.
Are you in favor of abortion being legal? You are pro-abortion.
To make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not.
I mean, I don't know if
It's so tired.
I am anti-marijuana. I don't think people should legally smoke it. You're pro-marijuana. Not you.
Yep.
Hypothetical person. You're pro-marijuana. You want people to smoke. Yeah, if you think people should have the choice to do a thing, you are pro a thing. Sorry. The way the Democrats have been able to give the word choice to abortion has been fundamentally not making sense for the last 50 years. We're just pro-choice. No, you're in favor of the thing being legal. You're in favor of the thing.
Be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care.
They freaking should feel like afraid for being prosecuted. They're killing a living organism. They're killing a living human being. Right. Yes, I want them prosecuted.
And John, I will say this though as a side note. I also think that you should possibly be prosecuted if you are one of those doctors or hospitals in Texas or Georgia who did not provide true life-saving care to a woman.
Or your liability, your med mal should certainly be kicking in. I mean, like it's
the fact that you have doctors that are refusing to save a life because they said, "Oh, I'm deeply worried that I might possibly get prosecuted under this law for performing an abortion."
Well, and I do wonder if there's help, if med mal, like insurance carriers, are part of this problem, like that. And I feel like so many of these entities are so dominated by liberals, whether it's hospital administrators, whether it's med mal insurance providers. A lot of these entities are traditionally pretty liberal. Like, are they almost making this a self-fulfilling prophecy that care is not being given for reasons that are not having to do with the actual laws that are being passed in these states?
And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state.
If you have low teen pregnancy rates because of abortion,
that doesn't count.
That's not a success.
Nope.
For the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro...
It's 100% true. The original text specifically said you needed to provide life-saving care. They deliberately altered the text to just say care, which people have interpreted as comfort care, which means not life-saving care. So Vance is 100% accurate.
That is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need.
Physicians are not ethicists. I hate this appeal to experts who are not actually experts in the subject matter at hand.
John, you didn't know when you go to OBGYN school and they confer the MD on you, you are also not only a doctor, but little known, you are a philosopher king.
Yeah, and you know all of what is right and wrong.
Right.
Yeah, I hate this way of acting as if doctors don't do immoral things. Because we're talking about a question of morality. We're not talking about a question of, like, yes, I would trust a doctor to do a DNC procedure, but doctors are not necessarily the persons who decide whether it's right or wrong. It's a question of public ethics and law. Just trust women, trust doctors.
Do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's
To accurately cite how a law is written, like we did.
not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong
about? That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continued...
Oh, the last debate where, Reduxio ad ABC News. Trump kept saying that they will execute the baby afterwards. What Trump should have said more accurately is that they will let the baby die, which is precisely what the law does.
Of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe...
Well, it works great, other than the 50 million babies who are dead. Because, again, we're just skipping past the actual argument. What we're saying is that 60 million babies, or however many babies have been aborted since Roe v. Wade, I think it's approximately 60 million. That's a bad outcome. You have to grapple with that as a bad outcome.
That works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals. They get early childhood education. They get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor.
So this raises a problem that Jonathan and I have talked about before. Republicans can introduce stuff to, social welfare spending proposals, things to help make it easier for people to take on burdens of a pregnancy. But I think there's two problems. One is the problem that no Republican will ever outbid a Democrat when it comes to social welfare spending.
Correct.
Never happened, never will happen. The other problem is that, and I think this is a problem the pro-life movement in general can have sometimes, we want to be so positive to women who are facing an unexpected pregnancy. You can have your dreams and have your pregnancy too, and here's an example of a mom who graduated college when she had an unexpected pregnancy. And I'm not saying...
Women are strong and powerful. They can do anything.
Exactly. And they are strong, and they are powerful, and they can do many things.
Yep.
I guess, though...
Does that mean that there are
just
not
feel
costs
that,
and challenges?
Yeah, and I feel like having a kid in my life has altered the kinds of jobs I would want to pursue. It closes off certain avenues of things you can do. You have to account for it. Now, it doesn't mean your life's going to be meaningless or worthless or bad, but there is pain and there is sacrifice that has to be attendant to having a kid. And that not every woman is necessarily going to have the means or the wherewithal, the support to be, the superhero mom who graduates college and becomes a doctor and blah, 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 blah after a teenage pregnancy. Like, some women will, but a lot won't.
Right.
And
that's
we have to say, one, that's okay.
Right.
And you can still have a meaningful and good and important life, and there's meaningful, good, and important things there. And we also have to acknowledge that the pain of not being able to do some of those things is still not worth killing another living human organism. It's still not worth killing another human being over. And that's hard. And unless you make abortion illegal, you can offer all the social welfare programs you want. I mean, you honestly can't. You can offer all the support, all the programs, all the nonprofit support, everything in the world. And there's still going to be some women who choose to have abortions.
Right.
And those acts of abortion are still wrong and unjustly taking the life of another human being.
And this is a difficult...
It's kind of, and it's hard to say, but I think I'd rather be honest with our interlocutors than just feed them, sunshine and rainbows out of my nose,
Yeah. And I think it is absolutely true that it is a morally right and valuable thing to try to mitigate difficulties for mothers who are facing unplanned pregnancies.
Absolutely.
And it is something that conservatives, pro-lifers, Christians, we should 100% try to do that. And,
right.
and there is a very real opportunity to do that through both potentially some public funding, potentially private sector, whether it's insurance requirements or maternity, paternity care, or paid family leave. There's an opportunity or an obligation to do that through private church resources.
Churches and nonprofits, yeah.
All of those things are good.
Yeah.
But in and of themselves, the absence of those things, even though it is tragic.
The absence of those things still don't justify killing another human being.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at this, like there were, tragically, John, I mean, you go back to the 1800s, again, my slavery example. I mean, there were some people at the time who tried to actually assert that, well, you know what, we can't abolish slavery because what are all these poor, African Americans going to do?
Yeah.
Once they are out of
once they're
out of
freed
slavery, who's going to take care of them? They don't know how to take care of themselves. They're going to be a burden on society, yada, yada, yada. And That is not
the thing is, and the thing is, one, probably that wasn't true.
Right.
But even if it were true, it doesn't mean you should still be able to have slaves, you know? Yeah. So anyway. All right. Let's continue.
Gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
So there we go. That's our Right to Life reactions to that portion of the debate, and this will be submitted out through various Right to Life social media. So thank you all for listening. Hope that was informative. Talk to you next time here at Right to Life.